On July 11, 1995, Srebrenica fell to the Bosnian Serb army. Dutch peacekeepers withdrew to Portokari, north of Srebrenica, where 20,000 refugees were crowded. The headquarters of the Dutch battalion on Portokari and the hospital in Srebrenica, where the Dutch were helping the wounded, were shelled. After Serb forces ignored a warning to stop firing on Dutch peacekeepers, 2 NATO planes bombed a column of Bosnian Serb tanks. This was apparently the only use of NATO air strikes. The next day, July 12th, the Security Council adopted unanimously Resolution 1004, which demanded that the Bosnian Serb forces leave the safe area of Srebrenica immediately, respect the safety of UNPROFOR personnel, and release all such personnel who had been detained. U.S. Ambassador Madeleine Albright told the Council that every one of its members had been, quote, forced to address raw aggression and war crimes in the former Yugoslavia for years now. She said the resulting exodus of tens of thousands of displaced persons north to Portokari is the sole responsibility of the Pale leadership, referring to the Pale hilltop Serb headquarters from which snipers were killing civilians below. Continuing from Albright, the brazen treatment of the Dutch peacekeepers by the Bosnian Serbs is outrageous. These actions fall squarely within the jurisdiction of the War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, unquote from Madeleine Albright. Here the U.S. ambassador is asking for criminal justice, but not for armed defense of the safe areas. Also on July 12th, the NATO presidency issued a declaration which, quote, demands an immediate halt to the Bosnian Serb forces' offensive and their withdrawal from Srebrenica, as well as full observance of the safe area status by all parties, and expresses its grave concern at the bombardment of Zepa and demands that it stop immediately, unquote. NATO is not now threatening armed intervention, even from the sky, to protect the safe areas, just making various demands. On July 18th, the Egyptian Foreign Minister Amr Moussa wrote to the President of the Security Council that, quote, the protection of the safe areas in Bosnia is a responsibility that falls directly on the Security Council under the terms of Resolution 836, in which the Council explicitly extends the mandate of the UN Protection Force in the former Yugoslavia in order to enable it to protect these areas. The organization has not, however, provided the forces in question with the necessary manpower or equipment to perform the tasks assigned to them in the proper manner. This is despite the readiness, says Moussa, expressed by many states members of the United Nations, including Egypt, within this framework, unquote. Moussa is putting his finger on a practical reason why UNPROFOR cannot do what its name implies in the way of protecting the safe areas, says Moussa. The UN forces simply do not have the power, the military power to do what they're supposed to be doing. On July 14th, Bangladesh wrote the Secretary General and the Council President, saying that it was seriously concerned about the situation in Bihać, quote, where more than 1,200 Bangladeshi soldiers are deployed as part of the UN Protection Force. And Bangladesh cited council resolutions which it said, quote, clearly laid down the UNPROFOR mandate to protect the safe areas and to authorize the use of air power, and the recent London Conference on Bosnia on 21 July 1995, which, says Bangladesh also decided to take all necessary measures, including airstrikes, to ensure the safety of enclaves in the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We, that is Bangladesh, would therefore urge that the Security Council take forthright action for immediate deployment of the Rapid Reaction Force to all enclaves at present under attack, including Bihać, as well as to launch airstrikes to deter Serb aggression against these United Nations designated safe areas. End of quote from Bangladesh. Continuing the quote, all necessary measures, unquote. This is not a quote from Bangladesh. I'm now making a comment of my own. The phrase all necessary measures, which you've just heard, is standard UN language authorizing the use of force. But it is the London Conference, not the UN, that is here described as contemplating force. On July 25th, the Secretary General's Special Representative for the former Yugoslavia, Yasushi Akashi, stated that, quote, for the last week, the safe area of Zepa has been under sustained shelling and repeated attack by Bosnian Serb forces as they attempt to repeat the intimidation and forced relocation of thousands of civilians we recently witnessed in Srebrenica. In the last 2 months, only 2 UNHCR, UN High Commissioner for Refugees, convoys have gained access, and food stocks are exhausted. Now, says Akashi, the people of Zepa are facing an onslaught of artillery, tank, and mortar fire. For the injured, elderly, and infirm, there is no escape from the enclave, and very little medical care if wounded, unquote. On July 26, Secretary General Boutros Ghali of Egypt stated that he, quote, fully supports the decision taken by the North Atlantic Council and agrees with its conclusion that an attack by Bosnian Serbs on Gorazde should be met by a firm and decisive response, including through air strikes, unquote. He went on to say that he, quote, is deeply concerned by current attacks on Sarajevo and on the Bihać pocket, and notes that the North Atlantic Council has asked the NATO military authorities, in consultation with the United Nations Peace Forces, to formulate proposals on the possible use of air power in these situations also, unquote. But what could air power have done to prevent the mass executions, I ask you? What was needed was overwhelming ground force. Anything less would have resulted in massive UN casualties or NATO casualties on top of the civilian deaths. Radovan Karadzic, former Bosnian Serb president, is in the custody of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, while former General Ratko Mladic is still at large. Since the tribunal is scheduled to cease operation by a certain date, arrangements must be made for Mladic to be tried by a proper tribunal, even if he eludes capture until after that date. Friends, that's all for this June 14th issue of United Nations Week, News and Views. We'll be back with the next issue. Meantime, do send along your comments on these or other UN-related issues to www.unweek.blogspot.com. Goodbye for now, and thanks very much for watching.